So I'm going to start by turning to Matt, who I credit as being one of the earliest people in Jersey to spot the opportunity for data stewardship. And I'm going to ask you sort of what caught your eye and what made you think this is an area that we should be looking at?
Yeah, no, thank you. And before I start, thank you as well for organising today, which is a really brilliant event. It's an exciting time to be involved in all of this. So yeah, thank you. I mean, I first became involved in this, first started looking at this area in 2016. So I suppose in the, relative to various British epoch-defining cultural and historical events, sort of after the referendum but before COVID. And so they're sort of alarmingly frequent now, those sorts of events, or certainly for civil servants anyway. So I work in the Law Officers Department in the Civil Division. I work on advice to government on new legislation, and development of new legislation. And at that time, we were working on the very early stages of the implementation of the GDPR. So the GDPR text has just been settled along with the Law Enforcement Directive. And the government had made the decision to go ahead and implement both of those substantial reforms. And that's a considerable investment for a small jurisdiction, not just for government, of course, in terms of there's got to be established regulators, there's new legislation, everything else, but also for all of the businesses and everybody else in the island in terms of bringing themselves up to the point of compliance with data protection, new data protection standards. And there were really good reasons to do that, not just from a citizens' rights perspective, because it's obviously really important, and others will say more about that, I'm sure, but also from the sort of Jersey PLC perspective, from ensuring that the financial services industry and the digital economies industry, that their interests were protected, because the flow of data to and from Jersey is of vital importance to all of those industries. And so, really good reasons to do this, to implement GDPR and the Law Enforcement Directive. But also, I suppose it occurred to us in government and myself as well, how should we maximise the return on that investment? Because yes, there's these advantages, but also perhaps Jersey should be looking for those things that it can do uniquely, that it can offer into the EU and the UK digital markets, which it's investing in order to get access to. So that was led us on to thinking about data trusts and whether there was ways to leverage the financial services expertise, the fiduciary expertise that we have in the island, to solve some of the really difficult questions that are there, and Dame Wendy and others have alluded to, about how you manage data effectively. How do you do it in a way which is going to maximise value for businesses, but also for citizens, and isn't going to prejudice people's rights unnecessarily? So that was sort of what led us on to thinking about data trusts. At that time in 2016, there wasn't a great deal. There was some initial reports that were very helpful, but we struggled a bit with articulating what the use case was, like what was the examples, where would this really be used in practice? And it was only really later that important change, the report in 2017 from the Committee on Artificial Intelligence and so on, that picture really started to build. And of course, a lot has happened since 2017. We in Jersey implemented GDPR and the Law Enforcement Directive, and that's all very much in place now. And we have good relations with the UK and the EU, despite some trifles overfishing. But for the most part, we're all right. So we're in a good place relative to our neighbours to innovate and to do things. So I think the opportunity, as you were hearing, is still very much there. Like we have the expertise, we have the connectivity, because we have the legislative arrangements. Other jurisdictions certainly are looking at this area, but haven't yet found the sort of magic formula for, I don't think, at least anyway, for how you do this effectively. So that's the space we're in. We've got an opportunity to find ways to use our legislative framework and our advantages to really carve out a niche in what is or perhaps a very big niche, shouldn't even describe it as a niche, within this very big market that potentially is going to develop. I should pause there, I think.
Okay, thank you, Matt. That was really interesting. I'm going to pose the question next to Paul. Paul, you're our Information Commissioner, and I jokingly poke you and say, but you're supposed to be the policeman. How can you be interested in data stewardship services? But I'll pose that in a more polite fashion and say, what do you see as the opportunity?
I think in terms of opportunity, we don't yet know is the true answer. But if we don't explore an opportunity when it's there, then how is Jersey going to be able to progress? How is it going to be able to innovate? We're at a unique advantage here that we can sit the relevant people around the table very, very quickly. We've got that agility. So when it comes to discussing really exciting opportunities like this, and I've done some background research over the last couple of years, and this is something that's already being talked about globally. Certainly on the other side of the Atlantic in the US, then I think Dame Wendy alluded to Solid and the work that Tim's been doing there. This is stuff that's already been gaining traction, and certainly from a global perspective in terms of data protection, other regulators are also looking at this space. So we need that agility, and we need to be able to work quickly to seize that opportunity, because if we don't go miss the boat. It's that simple.
Fab. And the JROC is coming on board and will be co-running the pilot trial with us. What are you hoping to see with the pilot trial?
Compliance with the law would be a good start. But I think one of the concepts of data protection law is about privacy by design, data protection by design in default, to put it in its official term. And what that means is baking in good data protection practice and procedures and process right from the very outset of the development of a new product or service or whatever it is you're doing. And this is an opportunity for us as a regulator to show that actually we're not like the general concept of a regulator that you might think. We are a progressive organisation, and we very much believe that privacy and innovation can sit side by side quite happily. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So being able to be part of that journey and help embed data protection from those early stages is certainly something that we've never done before. But it gives us that platform to work with you to make sure we get it right, because it really is important that if we're going to take this opportunity that we're going to demonstrate it to the rest of the world, then we need to get it right. So it makes sense logically to have the regulator in from the very beginning.
Fab. And we're very grateful that you're going to be there telling us how to do it. Right, I'm going to look at my lawyer friends across the way to start. Hopefully they can decide who should field this first question. This is quite a big area that we're going to need to condense down into a few minutes, but our trust and foundation laws offer opportunities and challenges. Without going into the full detail of what we've discuss briefly to give people a flavour.
Yeah, I'll talk to that. So I think in terms of the legal challenges in using our existing legal structures, there are three main categories. Is data even an asset? Can it be owned? Is it something that we can even put into a legal structure that we know as a data trust or foundation? What structure should we use? Should it be a data trust? Should it be a foundation? Should it be something else entirely? And the third one is, does the consent model fit anymore? Now, I think that's probably one for Paul. But to deal with the first point, is data an asset? Now, I know this is something that Dame Wendy has been looking at great length, or has historically looked at great length in the UK. And before we can talk about legal structure, we need to know, can the data be put into a trust or a foundation? If you cannot sell what you do not own, how could you then put it into a trust or foundation? So the prevailing assumption is that data has no inherent value unless aggregated within a data set like a database. And accordingly, it's not an asset and cannot constitute property in its own right. But if you unpick that from a legal perspective, it actually stems back from a case in 1979 and the criminal law courts, and a naughty civil engineering student stealing a paper for his next exam. And the magistrate said, well, it's not theft. And the High Court said, oh, it's also not theft, because he returned the paper, no paper was lost, and they distinguished it between trade secrets and matrimonial law and said, no, this isn't theft. And now we are stuck effectively with this issue about data not being an asset. So the concept is obviously hotly debated in the UK, and now the British Academy and Royal Society have recognised that actually data ownership is kind of tricky, and we might move and shift our focus to data stewardship. Fine. And the point is, as Paul was alluding to earlier, in Jersey we can fix this. We can look at this again, and if we think, actually, yes, we're happy to say that data is an asset in Jersey, we can get the right people in the room and either have a statute or make a statement and say, you know, Jersey trusts, Jersey foundations can accept some form of data asset, however we define that, into a data trust, so we could recognise data as an asset. Now, I'm not sure if Paul will have any thoughts on that.
It's a really, really interesting concept, and one I know that as a privacy regulator, my colleagues across the other data protection authorities have been wrangling with for many, many years, and still haven't really got to the bottom of it. So I think it's really important as well, I think, to when you're looking back at case law, like the 1979 case, that just because it's case law doesn't mean it can't be changed, because we've come a long way since 1979, I would hope. So there is again another opportunity there to reimagine what that looks like. I guess the concern from privacy regulators is more about if data is to become an asset and a commodity that an individual can sell, then how does that fit with protecting privacy? Are they essentially selling their privacy? And we start to get into a bit of a head mash scenario then, because, well, okay, if it's somebody's personal choice to sell their privacy, well then surely that's fine. But then what does that do in terms of devaluing privacy as a motion? And I think that's an entirely different argument. So I think in that sense, it's fascinating, but I don't know the answer, and I don't think any of my DPA colleagues know the answer either.
Any further comments from our legal friends at the end there? Matt, you look like you were going to... I know that Matt has some ideas.
No,
you don't have to reveal them here.
No, I mean, I think I agree. I mean, everybody's right on this in a sense. So, I mean, it's a real challenge. No, I suppose this comes back to the way I was making that actually there isn't a fixed answer. No jurisdiction has found, okay, the magic formula to resolve this is X. So we have still, I think, got an opportunity in Jersey to say, actually, we'll resolve this in the way that is effective for this jurisdiction. And I think what we're talking about is the balance between what's going to work legally and for trust structure and what are the ethical considerations that come with that. But that's, I guess, one of the exciting things we'll be talking about in the next round of working groups. But yes, certainly there is that. Jersey has that opportunity, and of course it's for the government to decide what legislation they do, and I'm not certainly in a position to say what they would do. But we do have that opportunity here in Jersey to do things which are innovative with legislation, and to do them more quickly than you can do them in a larger jurisdiction.
Cool. David, do you have anything to add to that, or shall I pose the next question to you?
Why don't you pose the next question?
Okay, so some hot debate, trust or foundation?
Yeah,
Please share your views.
It's a great Friday night topic, whether you... either strikes you. I mean, the great thing about Jersey is its flexibility. It's got a tremendous toolbox available to it already in the finance industry. We focus on trust and foundations because in the private client world, that's what we predominantly use for private wealth structuring. But you could use other structures, a company, partnership, variant, whatever. We've discussed on the working group both trusts and foundations. Both, I think, are suitable for whatever project you wish to use, and they are fully adaptable to whatever scenario you find yourself in. The trust we have at least 40 odd years experience with, foundations less so, but foundations are a corporate wrapper for a trust effectively. So we are looking first with the purpose trust, which has a trustee and an enforcer. There are no beneficiaries, as the name suggests, there are purposes to do X, Y, and Z. And we can tailor that trust instrument as the disclosure of the information, the results of the data, whatever that might be, to certain categories of persons or not, or it could be for research purposes. And the wonderful nature of this jurisdiction is its trust laws is well proven in the courts, not just in Jersey, but internationally as well as recognised, which holds us in good standards. So if we get the first step correct, then our reputation, Jersey PLC itself, the whitelisting, the high regulations that we have, all flows from it, and the professionals that we have in this island. I personally, this is me speaking a little out there, I don't think we'll have that much of a problem shifting from one asset class to another asset class, which is happen to be data. I can see as things may evolve that we could utilise our expertise in employee benefit trusts type scenarios to also use that for data for particular purposes. You may have an organisation or group of organisations that want to pour in data for research purposes, for example. You have the trust at the top and you have different plans which may be applicable in different circumstances. And that's all doable under our laws, and it is under other jurisdictions as well. But I think we're in a position where our structures are more tested than other jurisdictions. And yeah, our relationships with our regulators as well, again going back to the small jurisdiction, you can pick up the phone and you can walk around the corner and talk to these people when there is a problem, which puts us in a much better position than onshore jurisdictions.
Brilliant. No, go on. Back over to Wendy.
This is fascinating. I'll start off by saying I know nothing about the law, and my views about data as an asset change all the time in a way as more of this evolves. I just wanted to say, Tim Billesy is always very clear about things, and people talk about data as the new oil, and I was with him at a meeting the other day, and he said, data isn't like oil, it's not like money. If I give you money, I haven't got it, you have. If I give you oil, you burn it. I don't have it anymore. If I give you my data, I've still got it. It's an NFT in that sense. And then I share my data with you, and you then share it with someone else. And I know people that argue that you're never going to get trustees to manage these trusts because the personal liability on what might happen to that data, it may be too great. But the other thing I just want to say, when you think about this in terms of health, that's one of the holy grails in the UK, is can we aggregate the health service data so that you can sell that to companies to analyse and produce new drugs, customised medicine, things that will save lives, save money. That only works when you've got all the data aggregated, and there's the issue of the privacy and everything involved with that. But there's a question of, well, who benefits from the money that the company is going to make that's used all of our data? I don't begin to understand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm desperate to take the mic off, which I really oughtn't. Sorry.
No, it's lovely.
I think that's the exciting thing about Jersey. We have so many different structures that we can pick from. And I'm a banking and corporate lawyer by background, and obviously unit trusts is something we're familiar with, and they are very commercial trust structures. And we're used to splitting up ownerships into legal and beneficial ownership. So the thought of multiple people having interest in the same thing is something that's very familiar to us. And the idea then of being able to track data through a network, a platform, whatever, and as long as we can track it, being able to attribute a value from the end or end use cases, plural, back to the original source is something that's very exciting for Jersey. Like if we had a trust structure or some other structure, like a unit trust, we could return value to those end users, and end users, yes, but the end data subject.
Prosumers, as sometimes people call it.
I like that, the
Like
prosumers.
prosumer.
Yeah, exactly. So the prosumers, and in sort of engaging them more actively, they've got the trust and confidence in the fact that they've got good governance in our Jersey structures. They have also got the benefit then of the financial incentive to maintain their data properly and accurately themselves. I mean, I for one have a fake internet date of birth. I'm born in 1964. You know, we aren't incentivized to keep clean data ourselves because there's nothing in it for us. Actually, we're scared of doing that. And if we actually find the monetary hook that gets the prosumers involved, then actually we really might fix this.
That's lovely.
And just to pick up on the whether you get trustees to run these structures, people are mercenary, but how do you get paid for doing it? And you may have a structure which has got nothing but data in it. It's a dry structure, so in that case the trustee has to make some sort of arrangement with corporations in the background for its funding, its fees, and also its indemnification if things go wrong. The law allows you to be indemnified from the trust fund or the assets of the foundation, but if those assets have no money value, maybe you have to sell them, and that's not very good. And of course you've always got insurance in place, which is a mandatory requirement. And also we shouldn't forget that these professionals in this island are used to dealing with very substantial assets where they are reliant on interacting with other professional third parties. Now in this case, we discussed on the working group, didn't we, about the level of volume of data that may be in these structures where it would be impossible for the trustees to be able to keep on top of it, and it may be machine learning doing it. But in some ways, by analogy, is that any different from delegating authority to an investment manager who's investing your portfolios on a professional basis? As long as you as a trustee are on top of the delegation, making sure there's good faith, people are qualified to do it, things are done properly, it's a very similar position.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. That's really interesting.
This is why Jersey, people. I never hear anything like this.
Why
in the
Jersey?
UK. It's all too populated.
I'm very conscious of time. We're slightly overrunning already because we've been having too much fun. I think we've got time for maybe 2 questions. If anyone has any questions they'd like to pose, either generally or to the panel.
Thank you. Vicky Milner from Vibers. I was interested in this question about whether the fact of, whether data can or cannot be an asset, whether or not this is problematic. And I wonder if maybe that's the wrong question, in the sense that from an employment law perspective, we deal with restrictive covenants all of the time. And what you're trying to do is make sure that somebody who leaves a business can't use confidential information relating to the business unless they've got the right to do so. And so you're looking at rights over information. It doesn't necessarily matter how you describe that, but you have something that can be used by more than one person at a time, and the question is who has the right to do that. And so I guess understanding how other jurisdictions define data is really, really important, because we're going to have to work globally as well. But at the same time, I think that if the word is problematic, it's possible we're looking at the wrong word. And it doesn't seem to me that this is necessarily a showstopper at all.
No, I mean, I think that's right. So I think we looked at this from various different angles, and the sense was, well, this series of issues is solvable. It's about looking at it in the right way. I mean, one of the things we thought about, it sort of comes back to the point Dame Wendy was making, is whether you look at data itself as an asset, or whether you look at the value generated from data as the asset, and how you then determine what that value is and how it's distributed. And that's those sorts of issues are not unfamiliar to, of course, as you will appreciate, to legal and trust professionals here. It's just about finding the right frameworks within which for them to operate, and that could be somewhere where, if we're thinking about legislating at some point, that would be something that would be interesting to look at, but who knows?
I have one thought on that, sorry. Yeah, I think the concept of property and assets is actually notionally interwoven with all these bundles of different rights. So if you own property, that includes access rights, voting rights, values, corresponding obligations, etc. So we're all quite het up in what property means, but all of these access rights and control rights can be distilled into simple rights in a contract. So if we can put that into writing and take the emotion and the emotive word sort of asset or property away from it and just define it in a way which we're very able to do, it's absolutely insurmountable. Not insurmountable. Surmountable.
Brilliant. Time for one more question.
Hello. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Dan here from Continuum. I guess the question really is, it's what been touched upon, is the multi-jurisdictional element to this. So whenever we bang our heads against the wall and say, why can't we have a single KYC registry for the island that would then give Jersey a massive commercial advantage over other jurisdictions? The counterpoint is always, well, we've got lots of clients from lots of jurisdictions, and we as firms have people from lots of jurisdictions, so it's not possible to do a one-size-fits-all. So I guess, on whose behalf would the trust to Jersey be administered? Is it for Jersey people such that their data isn't held on US servers so they can monetize it? Or is it also for all of the international clients that Jersey entities have as clients, whose home jurisdictions will surely also be wanting to monetize and hold their data in trust? Was that a clear question?
Hang on, it's refusing to switch on. Thanks, Dan. I guess there are two aspects to that question. I will hand over the microphone in a minute, but I think it's important for us to remember that in terms of what the pilot trials and what we're thinking about at the moment, we're experimenting, so we're thinking local and using local data. But when we were exploring this as a wider market opportunity for Jersey PLC, we were looking at how we might facilitate international clients who might be somewhere else on the other side of the world, might be India, might be the US, how we might facilitate their data sharing arrangements and how we might regulate that. And we probably can provide those services from here. Obviously that has a requirement in terms of understanding the laws and also the data protection regimes in their locality. So we're very much thinking about export, and this comes back to the need for us to do a much deeper market investigation. There are so many potential use cases, there are so many potential customers that could be buying these services. We need to be thinking about, okay, which ones are going to be the first movers, and which are going to be best for Jersey. So where do we start? So that's very much in our sights. Does anyone on the panel have any other further thoughts to add to that? You can pass it along.
Perhaps both of these. I mean, there's a lot of different, I suppose at a very basic level, we could probably talk about this afterwards, it's quite a long question, but there's a lot of different permutations, obviously, about how we might export these services across the world. There's different regulatory standards in different jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions have issues with recognising trusts and would be more comfortable with foundations, or some the other way around. So I don't think there's a sort of a single answer to, well, how do you successfully export these services to different markets? But there's a lot more commonality in things like data protection rules than perhaps necessarily immediately appears on the surface. And there are actually quite a wide range of jurisdictions, commonal jurisdictions that recognise trusts very easily and recognise Jersey's place within the trust industry as a sort of trusted brand for delivering these services. So I think there are definitely challenges there, and one of the advantages of doing pilots and further exploration is that I think that will start to tease out where some of the challenges are. And a lot of this, a bit like with financial services or other things, is finding that sort of that toolbox of different solutions to challenges so that somebody can come to you. You know, it won't be today, it won't be immediately afterwards, but somebody will be able to come in 6 months' time or a year's time, maybe that's ambitious, maybe not, and say, right, actually I want to have a data trust and I want it to have data that's here and I want it to be administered from Jersey and with these, and actually it would be possible to pull those different resources, those different services together and offer them as a package from here. I suppose ultimately that's where we're trying to get to, is where it's offered from here, because that's how Jersey benefits. But yes, hopefully that's a partial answer. Did you want to?
Well, the only thing I'd add is, I mean, at the moment in the financial services industry, we administer tons of assets that aren't physically here. They're around the world. They're in Jersey structures. So there's not much difference in that respect. And in terms of I mean, Matt's absolutely right when he said the recognition of the Jersey structures is going to depend on the jurisdictions. You know, I remember dealing with a trustee who was trying to promote a trust and a divorce in Eastern Europe, and the judge was, what is this? I don't understand this. The foundations law had just come in at the time. Trustee said, well, how about foundation? Judge immediately understood it and wrote it into the court order. Yeah. And that was 2009. That was, I think it was August, September 2009. So, I mean, I don't see there's not problems that we can't overcome, which we don't already face in a day-to-day scenario. It's just that what we're talking about as a subject matter is quite different.
I think from a data protection point of view, I mean, this is one of the reasons that we wanted to be involved in this project, is because certainly from where I sit, our authority is part of the Global Privacy Assembly, which is a network of 130 jurisdictions and data protection authorities across the world. And data sharing in particular is a key topic of discussion at the moment, but nobody knows how to do it. And we're in a unique position here that particularly with our authority chairing a working group of the Global Privacy Assembly for data sharing, that we can have an opportunity to influence thinking in other jurisdictions. So it might be that whatever we resolve here, or whatever we might fix, we can set the mark. And we've got that distinct opportunity to really punch well above our weight. We often talk about that in conceptual terms, and Jersey being a tiny jurisdiction, how do we even begin to compete with the big players? But as well as has been discussed this evening, we're a perfect test bed, and there's no reason why we can't use what we find here to influence a much bigger audience. And certainly, I know that in global data protection regulation, there is very much in the forefront of all authorities' minds is how do we get to a more global standard. We look at GDPR, for instance, as the gold standard of data protection, and other jurisdictions are adopting their own legislation outside of Europe that closely reflects GDPR. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be the gold standard. There are, Asia-Pacific regimes which are starting to take the lead. There are the California Privacy Act is also engineering another way of thinking, and certainly what that is achieving is a more globalised way of thinking about data protection regulation. And there's no reason, certainly from my perspective, why data stewardship services and data sharing in general can't form a large part of that conversation.